A road-weary Utah Jazz lacked focus and discipline early, and that ended this one before it really got started. Brooklyn blows out the Utah Jazz. Ron Boone and I are talking about it next on POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
David Locke along with Ron Boone as we bring you POSTCAST tonight as the Utah Jazz just got worked early by the Brooklyn Nets. They allowed 43 points in the first quarter, 71 in the first half, trailed by 14. Knocked on the door a little bit, and you thought they might make a run, got it down to 10. There was a huge two-play sequence, actually, where Simone Fontecchio went at Mikal Bridges. One-on-one, Bridges a great defender. The Jazz did not get the stop. Or the Jazz did not get the bucket. They ran the other way. Bridges put a shoulder into Lowry, got the whistle and finished. I'm not saying Simone should have gotten the whistle. I'm just saying that's how it happened. And the Jazz, instead of being within 8, the Jazz were down 13, and then it really just let go of the rope from that point on, and they got blown out. Final score 147 to 114.
Yeah, I thought it was 2 consecutive plays in a row where they ended up scoring. One on a lob there, I think, was Claxton on the other end. That all of a sudden you go from 8 down to 13. Before you know it, they're back down 15. And the Jazz is not very good tonight anyway at playing uphill.
Yeah, and then it got a little ridiculous. Then it became like a little bit of a feast at the rim and alley-oop after alley-oop and showtime after showtime.
We've had ball games like that as well.
Yep, yeah, right. No, we did the last 2 games playing Charlotte and Washington. We certainly did do that. So the Jazz, do you worry about this one or not? I think it's a road-weary team. Been out for a long time. And that was somewhat represented how they played. I will say this. The one thing that is, I think, a little disconcerting, and it's not an issue tonight. So the Jazz allow the most transition of any team in the NBA. That's not great. That's not transition is the best way to score. And the Jazz do allow the most transition of anyone in the NBA. So I think that I do think that if you want to find something, if you're one who wants to claw into something and say, well, this is concerning to me. Yeah, 43 points in the first quarter, lack of physical presence defensively. They got out and ran. And then what Ben Simmons did to them in his ability to play transition, the Jazz really had absolutely no answer.
Had no answer, and he just made them. It's like he settled a team down that runs and play ISO. And they do a pretty good job at it, especially Thomas, the way he's been shooting the basketball. Dinwiddie wasn't a factor tonight. It might be a different story in the next ball game. He might be more involved, but they have some players, some wing players anyway that can shoot the basketball. But you're absolutely right. You said this during the broadcast. If Simmons can play, what do you think? 60%, 70% of the ball games going forward that's left, they could probably move up in the standings.
Yeah, I mean, he dramatically changes who they are as a team. One, it gives them with Deron Sharp out, they don't have a backup center. They were playing Royce O'Neal as a backup center in Houston. Well, now you got a 6'10" guy who can play as the backup center, who also then plays point guard. That's a real matchup problem for the other team.
It's a huge matchup problem. I mean, Jazz tried to play the zone with that lineup out there on the floor tonight, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, Ben Simmons is the story of the night here. 12 points. He ended up with 8 rebounds, 11 assists, plus 27 in 18 minutes tonight in his 7th game of the year, first game back since the first 6, been out for months, hasn't practiced with the team, had a run with their Long Island G League team. But that's really the story. And he changed the game. Like when he came in the first half, matching the Jazz bench, they were on a 10 something run almost right away.
Yeah, look at a guy that doesn't look to pass. I mean, shoot. Looks to pass, smart player, can play around the rim as far as layups and use both hands, I think, very effectively at the rim. That makes him such a valuable asset when you can put 4 other guys out there on the floor that can flat out shoot the basketball. And I think that's what you're going to see going forward with this team. Now, he doesn't slow them down either as far as pushing the ball or racing the ball up the floor.
No, he probably does the opposite. Probably speeds them up a little bit. All right, so from a Jazz standpoint, what was obvious to us in the first half was every time a Jazz player drove, hand swiping at the ball getting knocked away, no room, no space, went to chalk with Chad Forcier, Jazz assistant at halftime, and his comment was, we have terrible spacing, we're not setting picks, and so, we're trying to set some off-ball picks, but we're not setting them. So then, and we're not spaced. So therefore, yeah, they got hands on everything because we're not doing what we need to do to create that advantage for us.
Swiping at the basketball, something you're taught not to do, especially swiping down. I mean, if anything, they teach you to swipe up on the ball. And sometimes the ball is just that guys are driving and they put it very low to the floor. You can't do it. But these guys swiping down at the basketball, something you're taught not to do growing up as a team.
And it would, they're not a high turnover team. I mentioned that in the broadcast. It was strange that they were getting this many deflections and handling the ball and all these things because they're not a particularly good turnover team, which kind of accentuates the point Chad Forcier made that if this is a team that doesn't force a lot of turnovers and we're that active with their hands and getting that, then we really weren't spaced correctly. And that kind of counts to what I would call is the mental fatigue that you saw out of the Jazz tonight. We just saw a lot of what I would call giveaway plays, and we just didn't see a team that was particularly, you're out here, you think you're ready to go, you're trying to do everything you can to prep yourself for it, but when it gets out, we've been out, we left Friday of 2 weeks ago. It's getting lengthy, everyone.
Let's talk about their defense here for a minute, because I watched a segment today with the Clippers and how they've changed their defense and how Harden is playing defense and the rotation of and knowing where to go when the ball is in a certain position and closing out. I think this team, with the type of players they have, especially with Ben Simmons on the floor, they can play that way. And with doing that, that creates a lot of shots that are being challenged on the perimeter and keeps you from getting to the basket that often.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, yeah, good point. I'll just give you. How about I just give you a nod of good point?
Okay, thank you.
Should I do that?
But I just think they could be very effective that way with the type of team that they have, because they have guys that are all pretty much the same height, and wing players. I
mean, they're a very similar team to us. They just have not played well recently, right?
Yeah.
They've lost 17 of 22 coming in, where we had won 17 of 24. So it was just kind of two teams going the opposite side. It was a lot of talk pregame of confidence, and they gained the confidence early in this game. One note that just came by, you got to turn Ben Simmons into a shooter, but there's no way to really do that.
So many teams been trying to do that.
If you decide you're going to make Ben Simmons a shooting and lay off him, he just drives into the paint. And at some point, you have to stop him in some capacity, and it may take more than one guy at that point. So it's
coaches are very smart in this league, and they've been trying to do it throughout his career. I mean, especially in the last 5 years. And you saw that in Philadelphia. He's not going to take those shots. I mean, but he'll beat you around the rim. He just beats you in other ways. I mean, his strength is not shooting the basketball. I mean, he just didn't make it to the NBA because he's a great shooter. So I totally agree. Turn him into a shooter, but who can do it?
Let's go back to your open, Ron. We talked about the Jazz and the offense and how well they were playing and all the things they were doing. And let's go back to, you said, hey, this really comes down to Lowry, Markin, and Colin Sexton have been brilliant. They're both shooting 51% from the floor. They're both shooting 42% from three. Lowry was averaging 24. Colin's averaging 22. The Jazz offense came in as the number one offense in the NBA the last 10. Well, neither of them had a good night tonight. Lowry was 4 of 12, and Colin was 1 of 10. That's the first time we've seen Colin really struggle in a long time.
Yeah, it really was. Every time he drove to the basket, there was a couple of guys around him. This is the first night also where he did not shoot over tall defenders. So in other words, he was 6'1" tonight away from the basket, and he was 6'1" at the rim there as well, because usually he has pretty good success, I think, is getting some of those shots off. Just not a good night for him. Lauri Markkanen didn't have a good night there as well. His shooting only 4 for 12, and what did he have, about 27 minutes. He ended up with 9 rebounds, but not one of his better nights.
All right, we got to star this one up after the Jazz get blown out 147 to 114, and we're the Jazz were led by 21 from Keontae. Clarkson had 13 off the bench. Walker was very aggressive early, actually. I thought was playing about his best game of the year at 11. John Collins, 15. Lowry, 13. From a scoring standpoint, Colin had 7 assists to his credit, 9
Mhm.
rebounds for Lowry, 7 rebounds for John, and Walker had 7 rebounds in 19 minutes. What do you got, Ron Boone?
Well, I'd have Keontae for sure.
He made some nice plays tonight. That drive had both drive on the right side of the lane and the left side of the lane, both off contact, both
Mhm.
finishing. He showed some nice things tonight.
He really showed some good things, and oh boy, Walter Kessler.
I thought Walker played really well in his
yeah.
minutes. This was a tough night for him. I didn't know, Claxton had a pretty good night. Lonnie Walker got on top of him once. But I thought Walker Kessler had aggressiveness to him tonight that we haven't seen a little
And
bit.
the sad thing about you see Walker Kessler getting dunked on, sometimes, but that's because he has to help out with guys that are getting beat off the dribble,
Right.
and he gets caught, but he blocks more than he gets dunked on. But
Lacey would like to give me a star for my abstract expressionist discussion
thanks,
of
Lacey.
Jackson Pollock.
Thanks for agreeing with him, Lacey.
Okay.
You can have the star.
I went to MoMA today, and I just integrated into the broadcast, and I went to the Whitney yesterday, and hey.
Okay, David, we're gonna give you a double star.
Oh, I got a double star. Lack of stars to get out tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in. This has been POSTCAST. We'll be back with you from the Garden tomorrow. I think we'll do POSTCAST tomorrow night, but honestly, that broadcast site sucks so bad. There's a chance we might not be able to do POSTCAST tomorrow night.
So far up, and it takes forever to get up
Like,
there, and takes forever to get
back
down.
It's just
The worst in the league.
and
Yes.
it's good. It's nice because it's the worst in the league. Because I'm sure the league offices are really far away, so they would never ever. Oh, never mind. Have a good night. Hey, we lost by 30. Let me have a cheap shot to close the broadcast. See you.